Welcome to Your Voice to the World. I'm Eddie Pinero, speaker, filmmaker, and storyteller, teaming up with Terrence McMahon, retired CEO and best-selling author. Having built multi-million-dollar businesses and created lifestyle brands enjoyed by millions around the world, we've established a blueprint to do more and become more. Now we're joining forces to inspire you to share your voice and build the business and lifestyle you've always dreamed of. Welcome to Your Voice to the World. I'm Eddie.
I'm Terrence.
And we help you share your voice.
And we help you build your business too. And we use books to do that. And this week we are using The Tools by Phil Stutz and Barry Michels. And these are 5 tools that these two psychologists, I think one of them is a psychiatrist, use to instantly get someone out of pain or deal with problems, the 5 common problems people have. And these are tools that they don't necessarily teach to go back way therapeutically to the beginning of your life. These are tools you can like literally pull out of your swipe file and apply to your life and get relief from the 5 common problems.
Yeah, and I was
the big 5.
And right out of the gate, one of the things I was telling Steve and Terry is, from a psychotherapist, psychiatrist, like I wasn't sure what to expect. I wasn't sure if it would be loaded with data and test cases, but something they did that was really cool is they do make it. I mean, these are Harvard-educated dudes, and they take these concepts and they make it so almost like you could read this to a 10-year-old and they'd get something from it.
Yeah. We can teach all 5 tools in our time together today. They're that easy to use.
Yeah, I thought that was impressive.
Yeah, it's super impressive, and it allows like what you ever hear any of my stuff, it's all about the algorithm that you use to get a result. And what's awesome about the 5 tools, is there's 5 problems that people get. Like you're dealing with a problem right now, pain, resentment, indifference, insecurity, or lack of willpower are kind of the 5. Mm-hmm. And then when you get a cue in your life and you see that that's happening, you can pull a tool out and use it. And the way these guys came together was kind of interesting because it's kind of like our evolution.
Yeah.
Barry was I think a lawyer, went to Harvard to be a lawyer, became indifferent with law, which is, he experienced some pain because he didn't enjoy law and met this guy, Phil, who had these ways to get instant relief for clients instead of waiting for years of therapy. He wanted to give people usable tools that they could try to see if it worked to get them a result, an algorithm.
Yeah, right out of the gate, it was like been there, done that. Barry's like, I don't want to be a gray suit. I wanted to drive towards something that I love, and this was his ideal field, and that's where he met Phil. And did you find it relatable? A lot of parallels to what you're doing.
Yeah, there's in many ways. Yeah, I live with the pains. You have. Throughout, I'm 52, so you've experienced pain throughout your life, and I've never had a predictable system to deal with pain. Sometimes I run from pain. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I do well with it, and then I get away from what works because it was too painful, or I get lazy, or I get hung up in the wrong environment. Sometimes I'm with just eating. People want to eat, just simple. Eating healthy is not easy.
It's not. Yeah,
it's hard, and you create momentum when you break through that pain cycle to say, I'm not going to eat, like, let's say sugar or what else is it? Carbohydrates. Those are the 2 ones that seem to be everyone's devil because evolution, by the way, you crave them. So when you stop doing it, it's hard to do it, and you get in a momentum, and it works, and it works, and it works, and then you stop for some reason. A lot of times it's because you're hanging out with someone who doesn't have the same discipline.
Yeah.
And you drift.
It takes me to the power of habit.
Yeah.
Duhigg, he's like, look, we all have a certain amount of discipline. He's like, the best way to not eat food that you don't want to eat is to not have it in your house, period.
Right.
Otherwise, you'll break at some point. And I'm like, that's you can't lose if you set yourself up for success. If you rig the game. But What about you, Steve? Did you get anything from it?
The book?
Yeah,
of course.
Relatable.
Let's see. I like how Terry was talking about the maze. He always finds himself in the maze.
Yeah.
You asked me about the black cloud. I really liked the gratitude flow, the grateful flow, when he talked about do those few things. But I really liked when he talked about you have the five senses. You usually only believe in the things that you can use your five senses to see.
Right.
But
there you go.
the gratefulness was the organ of perception for the higher power. And it was a really interesting way of putting that, because you have that gratefulness and you feel that, and that's your connection to it. So it gave it like a tangible sense that we can all have.
Boom. High level
Yeah.
overview of what we'll be talking about.
What about you?
Yeah, I did find it relatable. I did. Particularly as we'll go through here, probably 1 and 2, I think, are the most just ways to deal with the emotional. Like, I get flashes of, well, everyone does, but like emotion and thoughts pertaining to certain people and certain ideas, it takes me right away to this negative feeling. Right. And I work my way back. I'm getting better at that, like to pull yourself up and be like, let's be logical, let's be rational, not emotional. But the way that they talk about how to do that in this book, I just think is cool. I think it's very helpful.
What do you see it as a business tool? This is a business, ultimately.
Yeah, well, I think that the most important things, like the cliches are always the most important, you know? So like how to manage discomfort. Well, business, just like in life, is moving towards the things that make you uncomfortable. And so it's how do you do that? Or, you know, like we'll talk about working with clients. Like sometimes that makes you want to take a long walk off a short pier, right? But it teaches you how to, internalize that in a way that's effective for both you, the person you're working with, and ultimately your business. So it's a lot of high-level ways of just looking at your situation that'll help you be more effective.
Yeah, I love the 5 pains that you walk around with that you're as an individual or a father or a sibling or a peer. You know, you have pain, indifference, insecurity, resentment, and willpower. Those are 5 common business pains too. I call them all problems. They talk about what therapy is a place you go to solve your problems.
Yeah,
that's what they talk. It's not like they don't lay on a couch. They say when you feel pain, use this tool. This 3-step tool. Right. Know that the other side of pain, we've heard this before, right? You've even written about it. The other side, everything you want, your infinite possibilities are on the other side of pain. So you got to go through the pain. And when you feel pain, you got to say, bring it on. I love pain, and pain sets me free. Those are the three things they say. So that's a tool. The cue is you're in pain. You don't want to do something because you see there's pain coming. Right, Steve? You're working out. I mean, no one's more disciplined than you. I'm sure you don't wake up and say, I want to go to the gym. I want to go, eat 1,800 calories worth of food. Right?
Well, so now it's my favorite thing about habits or like discipline is, I forget where I read it, but it was just having enough willpower to create that habit into a routine. So now it's like we were talking about earlier, is like that those small habits add up and they just become so subconscious that you can add on top of them. So now it looks like I'm doing all these strict things for somebody would like try to jump on the train that I'm on right now, but it's really just a ton of small ones that add up, that it's like, to me, it's effortless for the lower level ones, and just you keep compounding it.
Feels automated for you now?
It really does, especially certain things like nutrition. I don't even think about it. Like you've asked me about it or something, and I don't even know what it does anymore. And even it's a placebo effect we talked about as well, is that I don't even know. I used to count calories, for example. This is a good example. Is I used to count calories. I used to eat the same thing every day because I was at home saving money, and I would just eat the same thing, and I'd focus on how my energy felt. If it felt good, if I performed well, I'm like, okay, that's like checking off the list. I feel good. This is how many calories I ate. But I did it for so long that now I kind of understand what it feels like to eat certain things. I don't have to count anymore. And that saves a lot of time.
They call it intuitive eating. I've heard
know
that before. But you said you broke it down to something small to create something very big. I think that's the key to pain, is if it's painful, like what's that one thing you can do to take the pain on instead of like running from it or perceiving it to be too big. Like make it small, move towards it, not away from it. It's called the reversal of desire, right? Is that what they call it?
That's what they call it.
I had one that was
the name of the tool.
For you guys, is like you both did speaking, and I remember when I did that comedy thing I mentioned, is like I froze up and I felt like if I had that tool of like seeing my shadow of like what I was afraid of, instead of trying to avoid it, if I embraced it, it would have been, might have been able to express myself properly. Do you guys use that on stage ever? If you're ever talking, like you think of that shadow?
The shadow. But we're bouncing around a little bit, which is cool. There's only 5 tools. This one talks about insecurity. The shadow is, I guess, that ugly self that you don't want people to see.
Yeah.
That you're insecure. Have you ever been in a meeting and, influence flows out and down? So anytime you're in influence where people are of equal or lower status, you're cool. But anytime your perception is you're going up or you're climbing the ladder, the shadow's sitting there heckling you. Like, don't let them know these things about you, that you've fallen or that you're not necessarily perfect. And that it's, I guess when you're speaking, it's even at some level worse because it's a public humiliation sometimes. But I guess the idea of the shadow is to know and understand that we all have a shadow. We're all, scared, insecure at some level. And when you acknowledge that and become vulnerable with it, I think people will connect with you. When you don't and you try to hide it is when I think you get a misfire on your connection.
Yeah.
You miss the mark.
I've felt that, and they do a nice job articulating that. Like the shadow, they take Carl Jung's idea of, everything you're insecure about being your shadow, and it's going to follow you around no matter where you go, what you're doing. There's always these fears, the things you don't want people to see, and so they talk about that in terms of don't try and repress it,
Right.
Pull it out, give it a face. Know that it's with you wherever you go, and you can defeat it. And it's funny, Steve, to your question, I remember. I wouldn't really call this public speaking, but I did in my previous job. We had to do for the higher ups this presentation, and it was like a semicircle of all the executives surrounding a group of us, and I went up and. It was like the wheels falling off the wagon in real time. I still remember it. It was like a traumatic experience. It was so bad. And my thought, you do what a lot of people do at that point. You associate that act with pain. So it's
Right.
oh my God, I never want to speak again. If you asked me back then if it would be my career path, I would have said you're clinically insane.
Yeah.
But I built my career, my brand around running in the rain, doing the little uncomfortable things. And, when you start to look at pain as, the little building blocks that you ultimately stand on, you go, yes, this is going to suck. But I know when I walk out, I'm going to be a little bit better. And it's just like going to the gym, it's like you go once and you don't see payoff. It's a little sheet of paper that you don't see in time, but eventually, you can stand on a stack of paper. They add up. That's all mental shift.
Well, public speaking, especially, it's one of the most common questions you get is how do you do the public speaking without flipping out? And I've heard there's a lot of different algorithms and classes and courses on how to do it.
Yeah.
And one that I've seen that it kind of reminds me of this concept of the shadow, because their algorithm, I'll explain in a second. It's really simple and quick. We'll leave you a link to this in the notes on what the tool is. It's so simple. But picture someone naked. Picture the audience naked was one of the things. Did you ever hear that one?
Of course, yeah.
Well, the audience isn't naked. They're all have their clothes on, but every one of them has a shadow behind them. They're all the same. Everybody is going through the same subconscious insecurity struggle we are. And I think that their algorithm is take a look at, before you speak, you look at your shadow and you visualize what that shadow looks like. For me, it's a young person who's made a lot of mistakes, is overweight, is not really pleasant looking, but is a good person. So me and that shadow self can now address the audience saying, here I am, this is where I am and where I've been and where I've come from, and this is who I was, and here we are. That kind of helps.
Tell them the example with the woman, how she was afraid of the group of women, and then the other women were afraid of her. That's a really good.
Yeah, she was a model. So she came from nothing, broken home. Her husband had left her. She had a child, and she was trying to get him on a good soccer team and go to a private school. She got him into the school, and then she never felt like she was good enough. She kind of snuck in under the radar. She was super attractive because she was a model, and she was trying to fit in with these the perception of more uppity people, and she always got shunned away. So she tried to do speech lessons to talk like them, and then they just kind of ignored her, and then ultimately they were forced to be on a bus ride together, and they just started talking, and she basically just said, hey, you guys don't like me anyway, and she was herself, and they said, no, we just think you're better than we are. So they found out they were both going through the same exact thing.
Insecure.
Yeah. Like the other girls were all at the gym getting personal trainers because they wanted to look better, and she wanted to fit in, so they just never communicated with their shadows. Probably would have worked. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was cool.
Like, have you ever been in a meeting with someone and you're feeling each other out, and you think you're as good, maybe you're not, you're just not sure. Your shadow's barking in your ear. Their shadow is barking in their ear too. I almost guarantee it.
Yeah.
And the more you can be yourself, I think the more vulnerable you'll get. I know Brene Brown did a pretty famous TED talk on the concept of vulnerability, but I think the shadow brings your more true self to the meeting instead of this facade. Like social media kind of gives you that illusion that I'm really this perfect person, when the reality is I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, we are what we are. And I think that's the opportunity to make a connection.
I remember my grandfather saying that when I was a kid. Everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time. Like, everyone's just people. Everyone's got their own insecurities. So, like, would you agree with the fact that confidence is the differentiator on stage? Well, like, for me, like, you can talk in front of a mirror 50 times. You can do whatever, but there's nothing like just commanding the stage, being confident in what you have to say.
Yeah.
And it's almost like working towards that.
I think confidence comes with believing in the reality of it. To speak to Ryan Holiday's book about stoicism, like accepting for the way they are, and own it and endure. I think confidence comes from the knowing that you will work and outwork everybody. Because it's as little confidence as you may have, if it's backed up with perseverance and hard work, you'll make it.
Yeah. It's learning to trust yourself.
Yeah. I mean, to speak to your grandfather, it's easy to put your pants on one leg at a time when you're an admiral.
Right.
I mean, he was an admiral. That's kind of an interesting, that's to speak to, the military,
Yeah. And he came up, Roxbury, which is a really poor suburb of Boston, was at the time. He didn't have anything, really the American dream, always working multiple jobs. He always tells me the story. He's like, it's amazing on Christmas seeing like what it's like now. When I was a kid, I remember my father gave me an orange once. Like, that's what was under the tree.
Right.
And, and I think that humility, in the way he approached life, really helped him throughout every stage. I mean, that was Mass Maritime. He was towards the end of his life, he was the president at Mass Maritime. And my father works there. Like I'm there a lot. And so one of the things that people say all the time is, he was so down to earth and he was so relatable. And that's something that I aspire to, take from him.
Well, that's basically a general, right?
Well, it is a general, equivalent,
right?
Yeah.
So you got to understand that that's like a CEO on double steroids. It's super hard to be that level, and to get that level of accomplishment, your grandfather must have been through hundreds and hundreds of different journeys where he faced pain, he took action, he felt indifferent, he endured, he felt insecure, he overcame.
Right.
And every time you do that as a person, you evolve and you figure out tools of your own that help you get past these common pains to get the ultimate level of accomplishment. I think that's the human condition, like continuing the journey. And I mean, I don't know, I retired a few years ago. Like, my life didn't end then. I was capable of not working or doing something, but it wouldn't have been worth living if that were the case, because you become bored very quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm sure to the day he died, he was probably bettering himself.
And I can tell you what helped him do that is for sure, saw this firsthand, is confidence, which came from his there's nothing about American history he didn't know. He was the most well-read human being. Like, you could dive into any conversation. And I think, like, that just goes to show you, there's a little bit of a parallel or tangent here, but, the book a week, 2 books a week thing, it's not negligible. It's everything. It really, because it gives you the confidence. Anytime you read a book, we're talking about like little things that build you up.
Yeah.
It makes you a little bit, it's like injecting progress into your brain.
Yeah.
To make you a little bit stronger, to, that whole confidence is earned thing.
You and I were talking, Steve observed this conversation last week when we were wondering whether or not our format for this podcast was the correct format.
Right.
And we had kind of a breakthrough epiphany because we discovered if we don't get the business result out of the podcast that we're looking for, we both read and hyper learned a book a week. So we get the direct benefit as entrepreneurs and leaders and people of the knowledge that's embedded in these books.
Right.
And we try to take these books and these ideas and curate them. We help you see what you can use, take these books to your business. But that was a big part of a discovery that I made last week, is that no matter what, gobbling up a book every week, which is painful, so you got to do the work. I had almost none of this book read Friday, so I had to read it over the weekend. A lot to do, but it was important to me. Mm-hmm. And I took the action. I created momentum, finished the book, enjoyed it, loved it, and here we are teaching it.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing.
And at 2.0 speed, you feel like you still have that morning run mentality. It's like, haha, I'm doing this faster than everyone else.
I can't believe that's an algorithm in itself. How to take in a book quicker. So you read it at 2. Listen to it at 2, right?
2. It took me about maybe 3 years to get to that point. I was at 1.25 for a while, and I've really comfortable with it now. Yeah. And that's helpful.
What I do, and I was doing 1 up until a few weeks ago when you were doing 2. Because you're gobbling, all of a sudden you're catching up and passing me in books. So I was like, what the hell are you doing? So now I tried. I couldn't do the 2, so I went down to 1.5, which I could do with some ease. But now I open the book and read along at a high speed, and it works really well. So I could do 1.75. So I could do these books.
You found a hack?
Yeah, it's an algorithm.
That's another thing that these tools teach you is... like Eddie was talking about, is make these tools work for you. You got to try them. You got to test them. You got to see how they work for you and adjust them.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandmother was like 2.0. She's like, that defeats, because she listens to a lot of fiction. Right. And I'm like, well, yeah, in your case, I agree 100%. It's like watching a movie. You want to enjoy it. And not that this isn't enjoyable, but there's I don't know. Maybe I'm overly competitive. I'm always like, I want to take this in and move on to the next one.
I have a weird thought that I had is I always read physically recently. That was started when I started reading The Compound Effect, because I started to study it and visually know where things were in the book, so it helped me retain it. But then when I started listening and I was still retaining it, a part of me wanted to keep reading because it felt better than, because people, I'm like, nobody sits down and reads anymore. I'm like, I felt better than other people who listen to it. But if it's holding me back from speed, if I can kill a book in half the time, should I do it? And it's like an experiment now, and I'm retaining all of it. So I'm like,
there you go, man.
Well, there's definitely people listening that like to read and don't want to do it fast.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it doesn't make a difference.
Whatever
what
works
I love
for
about
you.
these tools is it's a deliberate, and I'm not saying they work perfectly. I haven't really even used them to say that intelligently, but it is what I do know about it is these 5 pains come up pretty regularly. And if you're aware, I think one of the biggest benefits to have is awareness. If you're aware a pain is occurring, it should be a trigger to do something. They have an algorithm, bring it on, pain. I love pain. Pain sets me free. Is there intake action? That's their algorithm. But if you're insecure, indifferent, or you feel a resentment, or you're in the maze, they call it, it's a trigger to do something.
Right.
To make the situation better instead of having it compound worse.
Exactly. If anything, it's awareness.
Yeah, awareness is the key.
What's Aristotle's quote on awareness? Isn't it really...
He has a computer.
I don't know how to use
Aristotle's quote on awareness.
Wait, before I look that up, have you heard of Man's Search for Meaning or read that book? Man's Search for Meaning?
Viktor Frankl, yeah.
There was a really interesting thing that I remember from it. It reminded me of The Shadow, which was... I looked it up. It was paradoxical intention. Have you heard of that? It's in psychotherapy, paradoxical intention is deliberate practice of a neurotic habit or thought undertaken to identify and remove it. So basically what he was saying in the book was for speaking is if you feel like you're going to get nervous, intentionally think the worst is going to happen. I'm going to get nervous. I'm not going to be able to speak at all. And if you accept that, then you eliminate it. and it's like intentionally going into that worst fear.
That's a good. I haven't read that book yet. I've heard a lot about it, and one of the things I heard about it was in the prison camps there was someone that was going to kill themselves, and he says, "I don't have a plan for my life now. I'm here." And he said, "This is what the book is based upon. Maybe life has a plan for you to speak for. There's some universe at work that's got a plan. Maybe the universe put him in the prison camp so he could write that amazing book to help millions and millions of people."
Exactly.
They touch on that in here, don't they?
Yeah, that's what it's about, the universe, and whatever you believe in spiritually. We're a non-denominational podcast. If it's Allah, God, a higher power, or a higher force, spirituality, whatever it is, something's could be the belief that something's at work to collaborate with you on your journey of evolution.
I have the Aristotle quotes.
What is it?
One is knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom.
Yeah,
that
that's
might
the
be
one.
it. And then this one's one of mine that I bring up a lot. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. I love that one because it's like the awareness, and it's scary to think of those like painful things of like your shadow. But if you're able to do it, and understand that you're not becoming that person, but you have to accept it so that way you can work with it.
My mind goes right to our hyper partisan times. It's like I want to take that and put it on a billboard. Like you can entertain a thought without it's okay.
So what happens when someone cuts you off when you're driving? What do? Tell me. They cut you off.
So this is
what do you do
This
now?
is the maze Steve alluded to a little bit earlier. So the tendency is to retreat into this maze of negativity and anger and whatever other thing you want to put in there. Stupidity I hate it. There's a very basic level of competency that I feel like would be a real treat if everyone had out and about, but that's not the way it is. So I go right into this maze of just frustration. And ultimately come above that and remove the emotion and start thinking rationally. But they talk about it in a very, very, interesting way. Don't get mad.
It's fluffy, right?
It's fluffy.
Yeah.
It's fluffy.
It's interesting though. Active love, right? It's called
active love.
Yeah.
Yep. Sending love to that person that you might be frustrated with.
Right.
Seth, remember we were talking about Seth Godin? He said, "You can't be curious and angry at the same time." So have that moment.
Right. Yeah. You wonder what hurry they're in, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and trying to change anything to get out of the maze. The maze just costs you money. And if it's a business books, the maze just costs you money, period. And rather than take revenge or take action against whatever happened to you that you didn't invite into your world, you got to be able to deal with it, with curiosity. Their algorithm is, picture yourself, instead of giving them anger, give them love. You kind of flip the coin on them and say, hey, I think Martin Luther King said it the best in one of his speeches as he closed in front of an angry group. He said, "I would rather die than hate you, so I love you." That's what King said at the end of his speech.
That's awesome.
So
Never heard that
He had
one.
every right in the world to hate the people he was talking to, but he'd rather die than hate them. So he said, "I love you." And that's kind of the idea. The algorithm is, picture you're in bed, surrounded with warmth and love. Breathe it in and breathe it into them.
Yeah.
Whoever's giving you that bad vibe. I know it's a little voodoo, but
super fluffy.
it's fluffy.
But when it comes from people with their background, it's like, okay, it's almost like you appreciate it more.
Yeah, you should
They
put
curate
a
it.
pink rabbit suit on before you do it. That way,
Exactly.
that way, if it's impossible to be in the maze when you're in a pink rabbit suit,
Right.
blowing imaginary love at you.
Can't be mad at a pink rabbit. That's for sure.
I think it's Tony Robbins talks about changing your state, but if you just look at look at a problem a little differently, like why should I be mad at this stranger that just cut me off? It's just going to take the energy away from something. You could be listening to a great song and a total vibe, and all of a sudden someone cuts you off and gets you in that state.
It's perspective. It's another way to look at things. And so in business, with clients, there are a lot of times where there's a genuine misunderstanding, and you're forced to. You could go as far as sending love, but even grasping some type of understanding of their point of view. Similar concept.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. You're trying to picture yourself in their shoes type of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like we both want the same thing. Again, we all want to win. And so, taking yourself down a level, don't let yourself get lost in a maze, and think more, how can we get a result? Which is a mental muscle. I mean, you can train yourself to do that, so that your instinct is not maze. It's, let's solve it.
Right.
Let's solve it.
Yeah. And sometimes it helps to be the term objective. I mean, I've learned so much from so many books that comes out. Like, remove yourself from the experiment and look down on it as if you're an observer.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, you're objectively looking at this thing unfold, and you don't know what if you're observing that, I wonder why that guy cut that person off, that guy with the nice black Cadillac, versus instead of saying, he's on his way to the hospital,
Right.
And this, instead of being in the middle of it, that kind of helps too.
So at the end of each of these chapters, people ask questions, and someone asks what isn't constantly, taking that route of, appreciation, being understanding, doesn't it make you vulnerable? Doesn't it, you'll get walked all over. And he has a good point, right? Barry says, you're never, it's not that you're hiding your emotions, or that your emotions, it's that you're never making the right decision when you're knee deep in emotion. So you want to take a step back, let that subside, because then, the real you can come out. It's never, you are not your emotions. You are sort of what's underneath them. You just got to get to that point.
Yeah. That's interesting. Very few things work well when you're in an emotional...
When you're mad.
Yeah, very few. It's almost never... Hemingway used to write drunk letters to people that criticized his books, and his wife would pluck them out of the mailbox.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He'd be drunk, and he'd be all emotional. He's a great writer, of course, because you're quite eloquent with your words in a very quick fashion. So I don't like getting in arguments with you because you can zing fast. I just kind of leave it alone. But you can't take back things like that sometimes. So he writes the letters, and she plucked them out. Lincoln wrote a famous letter to the general at the Potomac that had, I forget the general, but his wife plucked the letter too. So emotions aren't usually the best way to go into anything. But there's also one last tool. There's two, but one is, there's four basic tools, and there's one tool that rules them all. It's like the Lord of the Rings is. No one cut you off, but you're in a cloud. Like you're in a state of, we called it, you and I agreed upon, indifference.
Yeah.
Or blah. What would you call it? You of course, you're in a sugar high all the time.
Yeah. I don't know what I'd call it, but it kind of like a fog or a haze.
A fog, yeah. Like you're just off. Right. And what do you do for that? That's the grateful flow, he calls it.
The picture he has for that black cloud is you use grateful flow. Yeah, it breaks through that cloud, and you're connected to something higher. So you connect yourself to something higher.
Okay. Like that. You were talking about it this morning as you came in.
I like the one. The example he gave was I think he was riding on a bus to the gym, to the YMCA to play basketball, and he has to go through the rough neighborhood. And he says, like every New Yorker, he just looks straight ahead and pretends everything around him's not happening. The dope dealers on the corner and stuff. But I think it was his last time going, if I'm getting this correctly. And then when he gets off the bus, he sees his surroundings, the rubble, the like graffiti and all that. He sees it through a lens of gratefulness that he's leaving, or that he's has memories from it. So he sees it through a lens of love, and he sees it so differently just from seeing it through gratefulness. So he's able to break through that cloud of all that just from that emotion. I don't know if it's an emotion or just a feeling, but they say it's like an organ of perception, which I really liked.
Yeah, because he had a medical scare. I guess it was a medical scare that he had.
Oh, right.
That because his brother died of cancer when he was a little kid, and he was trying to protect. He was sick, and he was protecting his parents from knowing the information, because his parents went through the loss of his little brother. And finally, it got bad enough that they had to do the test. So he finally got the test back, and he was fine. So that one time he went through the neighborhood, he was starting to say, "Wow, this is a cool neighborhood. Look at all the rubble. Look at the graffiti. Look at the diversity that I can experience." He was looking at things,
just appreciating it.
And the algorithm is just, if you're feeling that way, find 5 things that you can be grateful for.
Yeah,
that's the tool.
That's it.
And
power of gratitude.
It's hard to be. It's hard to do something bad when you're feeling so good.
It's another example of pulling yourself up out of emotion. And then that light bulb's kind of going off. That's really what all these are. It's like pulling yourself up out of an emotive state, kind of like how you said it, objectively.
Right.
And it's just different ways to do that. For me, we do so much in so many different areas. I always say, because this is relatable to everyone, the social media component of our business is so prevalent, but it's the front-facing thing. Like, there's so much we do behind the social media that's arguably more important. Yeah. And so what comes to mind to me is like when things like the detail goes wrong and it feels like the world's falling down and you're frustrated and, you get that fog of, I want to say chaos. And then it's like, dude, think about how silly and trivial this is to be angry about this or upset about this. You have so much to be thankful for, right. Everything to be thankful for. And that's kind of what I took away from that. Personally, everything's sort of contextual to your own experience. Yeah. But that type of thing, I just get like lost in silly stuff sometimes when you're trying to juggle a lot. So when you can step back and be like, nope, thank you for everything else that's just there.
Wouldn't you like to play yesterday like you were controlling a character in a video game? Like you can replay yesterday, all the things you did and the tools that you use for the good or for the bad for situations. Yeah. My mother and my mom's visiting from New England, and we got on an elevator with this little girl. She couldn't have been any more than 5 years old, and she's in a wheelchair, and she was playing with a toy, and she was this giant smile on her face. And my mom's talking to her, and the girl's talking back, and the girl was French. She didn't speak any English, but she's still smiling. I'm
Universal language.
They were just both smiling and enjoying each other.
Not
but
French.
As I'm leaving the elevator, I'm like, wow, like I'm so grateful that experience happened, but also that I'm fortunate enough to be healthy and able to do what I'm doing. So you look at yesterday, I look at that. Imagine if you can play yesterday like you were controlling a character in a video game, using tools when you feel sad, indifferent, insecure, pain, or you just forgot to do something, which is the last tool, willpower. You just stopped doing it or forgot to do it. It worked once, you used it, you got results, and then it didn't work. It stopped so well, we stopped doing it. I've seen that a million times in business. Things that work, you just all of a sudden
no
stop.
reason, move away from.
We do it.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, we stop doing things that work.
That's why morning sessions are so important. I think, it adds a huge, it's a little hinge on our day. I'll speak for me on my day, because you can sit down and you can think about all the things that you're grateful for.
It's an algorithm, right? Because before we started this podcast, I was trying to ask Steve, like, what's your black cloud? And he runs like we were having kind of the argument, like you're always going to have a black cloud, and he's in such a routine. And you're probably one of the more routine human beings I know. A morning session is a routine. It's an algorithm to get up, to take some inspiration in, to journal, to plan your day out. But when you have those routines, I think the key to this is all having routines and systems to deal with the emotions of life.
Yeah.
One thing I liked with the source, when he talks about connecting to it, the gratefulness, it's like your perception of the source, the higher power, whatever you want to call it, that feeling of love. And if you can feel that, and the one thing I haven't heard before, because a lot of these books talk about gratitude journaling and all that type of thing, but he says that source, that higher power, when you feel that, if you can remember that everything is stemming from that love, that everything you encounter is an evolution to who you are. So it's guiding you through your evolution. If you could think of every moment, good and bad, as an evolution for you, that's a really great way to feel that gratitude.
Everything's
really
helping you.
Yeah.
That's a Ryan Holiday concept, too. Everything helps you. You decide to make things a problem when you put emotion into it. You take out emotion, it's still the same thing. There's an obstacle and there's a solution. Same exact thing. Everything's moving you where you need to go.
Yeah. And the last tool was the Jeopardy. When you have urgency and you've abandoned the tools, because he had a comic that he was coaching, and the comic had issues, and he didn't have a tool, so he used the tools, got all these results. Started doing his tool was insecurity. He only told jokes to his friends. And he never auditioned for higher, bigger roles because he knew the jokes would work on his friends. He never stretched himself. Then he finally used the tool, got bigger gigs, became a little bit famous on a sitcom, stopped using the tools, and got rattled and And that he says this happens. Like people stop doing what works, and the tool is jeopardy. It's almost having a dialogue with your deathbed self. It's looking at someone that that you're going to be dead soon, that your mortality is certain, that life is not infinite. The uncertain date of your death is the enemy of progress. And he actually quoted something that Ryan Holiday quoted in his book. I forget what the quote source was. He says, "A man to be hung on a fortnight concentrates his brain wonderfully." Mm-hmm. Like when you're going to die, you certainly get clear on what you want to do.
Yeah, the trajectory, it becomes finite. You realize there's a finish line. You gotta.
You look at that, like the conversation, the visualization you have is with you. On your deathbed saying, "Come on, man, did you really not do that when you could? Because you're going to be dead soon."
I really liked when he talked about these tools constantly have to be worked. Like you're always a work in progress. You never finish. That's what you're saying is like that guy thought he does these tools and then he's on easy street, as he puts it. But you constantly you're always going to get disconnected. You're always going to fall. Mm-hmm. You always got to constantly use these tools. I love that.
It's how does he put it? It's not a one-time thing.
I think I know what you're talking about. He says it's not a blue pill. It's a magic pill. It's a blueprint.
Yeah,
It's a bluepront. Yeah,
that's a little poetry there.
Yeah,
like
it never stops. I mean, you like a farmer that grows grows crops. They're gone every season. They got to put them back in. I think life is that way. Nothing's ever over. I know it's a little doom and gloom, but you got to keep working on something. Mm-hmm. Because you end up getting atrophy, right?
Yeah.
What you don't use in your life. It's the evolution of self. Like we continue to evolve, and we use tools to get past it. Whatever works for you, though, works. So we're not saying these are the tools the one and only tools. These are suggestions on creating algorithms for your life. When you feel this, do that to get a result.
That's the magic. And at the very least, right, if you, I keep knocking my mic down. If you hear these and you think, I don't like the idea of spreading love in a pink bunny suit or whatever the case, like at least be, I appreciate the awareness, like the call to action on these 5 things, because when you realize the problem is we don't realize they're happening. Like no one's like, okay, what I'm going to do right now is sink into a maze, honk, and give this guy the finger as he cuts me off. It just happens. And so being aware that these situations are happening all around you, at the very least will add a lot of benefit and value to your life.
Yeah.
Hopefully that wasn't too preachy, but
I like the pink bunny suit. I don't know where that came from.
Hey, if the pink bunny suit's your thing,
It's hard to be pissed off at somebody when you're picturing yourself in a pink bunny suit. A lot of these tools are visualizations, like little mind games you can play with yourself to interrupt your state.
And that's what we were saying too, is that like if it's a placebo effect, if these actually work, change your state. If they work, they work. And
right.
That's what we were saying. I got a question here that kind of sums it up too. I don't know how you're going to answer this, but what do you find to be the most important tool to start with? Is there one you'd start with? It's probably different for everybody, but
I was just going to ask that question. What one do you identify most with?
Well, I think the most important. I am so biased.
Can I be a little out there too? And then me and Steve will say which one we think you should use too. Let's do that game.
Here
we go. There you go. Which one do you think you identify most with?
Pain. Mm-hmm. Just because it's changed my life so drastically, and because I have built a business around that message and a brand around that message, and we're not inclined to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I've just invested so much time and energy in teaching myself to do that, to run towards discomfort. Cool. And I know what you guys are going to say.
What are you going to say?
Well, I think my answer is, you want to go first?
No, you go first.
Okay.
I'll let you go.
The thing is, I think pain is the one I feel like it's always a work in progress, but I think I might have worked that one the most. And the example I'll give is that when he said all these tools are a work in progress, my mind immediately said I was glad, because that makes it feel like something people are like, oh man, I don't want to keep working. I want to do that. But I'm like, whenever there's more work to do, it gives me that earned confidence that you mentioned, which is like, I'm ready to be relentless from that book. I'm ready to do what others can't. And if there's another thing that says, like, oh, that's where people stop working, that's what, like, that fuels me more.
Yeah.
So that one is like, that's kind of weird because like the pain, I feel like that's the one I had to start with, but I've really worked that one into like something I reverse. Like I've reversed that desire, as he says. But the one that I resonated with, I think, might have been the Grateful Flow, because I love that one of like.
Which one are you going to suggest for Eddie?
Oh, for Eddie?
You got off topic because you always want to avoid the difficult.
You asked me, so I forgot. So the one for Eddie, let's think. Maybe the Grateful Flow, probably for Eddie, because a lot of times we go back and forth. We're in a situation. He might be a little bit on one side, and I'm a little bit more, almost like too out there, like giving people too much of the benefit of the doubt. And so maybe he'll.
We argue about this all the time because
Yeah.
I'm super pragmatic and I'm like, what do the numbers say?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Steve's very optimistic and he's like, but things are going to be great. Like, Steve, what are they now?
I think the Grateful Flow. I think the maze could be easily. I think the
maze,
algorithm for the Grateful Flow. But we all get caught in the maze. But I think the concept of being stuck in a loop that may or may, if you were objective about it, and a lot of things that I've seen, you get so many great results. I think when you get smaller results, you get hit in a maze where you could just. I think that would be one thing that when you're in there, you can't be artistic, and then you rob the world of a great message. So whatever you use to get out of the maze, whether it's active love or the Grateful Flow, I think they're pretty related. Whether you're going to give good positive energy into somebody. It might be towards a person or a situation, which is gratefulness, the Grateful Flow.
So in other words, when I don't get results, I get sucked
That's
into.
it. Yeah, and I think it robs your creativity. At least it costs you time, which is also, that's one thing.
Well, I'll work on that. I'll work on flying out of that maze.
It's like when someone walks over and says, "Hey, here's a good book. You may want to go to chapter 6."
What did you say?
Chapter 6. I mean,
Who are we talking about? You gave a book to someone.
oh, my friend Fred. He told me, "Don't ever give me a book again." He's pissed off. I gave him a book on vision.
Oh, God. This is a guy flying around in a helicopter too, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, his private jet. Yeah, he told me no. He listens to the podcast too. So.
Hey, Fred.
I loved it. I get his perspective though. It's like, I guess you're right. Like, I'm giving you a book on vision, saying you have no vision. For me, the one that resonates most with me, I think that could help me the most. I've made progress on many of them. I think they bounce around, but right now it's inner authority. I have to be really, really conscious of that because I think it holds me back. Because I almost feel myself in meetings sometimes questioning whether or not I'm even qualified to give advice because I get asked a lot of crazy questions. I've been through so much. I was on the phone last night with someone who's terminally ill with a liver failure, and I'm telling her things that she can do to get results that I'm not sure will work. But I also told her
That's such a delicate topic too.
well, I can't give her medical results, but I referred to her, for example, I gave her an idea from a book called Radical Remission. She's terminally ill, and I said the last thing you should do is listen to the doctors telling you you're going to die, because you might not, because it happens all the time. I'm not dead. I had like a 0% chance to live at one point without something. I said, well, the without something can happen. So your job's to stay alive long enough to get that result. So Kelly Turner wrote a book where 400 plus people were terminally ill, incurable cancer, and they lived. So she's wanted to know why, and she found like 70 different modalities, let's call it, that people use to live. We're all different. But then she found 9 common ones, 9 that everybody used in some way to get the result, which was living. And only 4 of them were like physical things. Like 5 of them were spiritual. They're all using some kind of support system, some kind of faith, some kind of meditation. And I told her that. But as I'm telling her that, I'm thinking to myself, am I full of shit? And I know I'm not full of shit. And I also I qualified it by saying, whatever works for you works, because you got very little downside to trying something new.
Right.
Because the unthinkable could happen.
Boom.
Which is the end.
The upside's always bigger.
Huge.
Yeah.
That was it. So
All right.
What about you, Steve?
I think that's good. I just want to say, if you want to leave a question, leave a voicemail. The number is 754-273-6069. And you want to hit them up with what we got for next week, which is...
yeah, this is a Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. This is a really, really good book. I'd encourage you to read it before the podcast. And if you want to go out there, the audio version of this is actually kind of the combination of an audiobook and a podcast. He's basically interviewed on each chapter of all the ways that he was a Navy SEAL, to make himself better and reach a higher level. That's the message that this book's going to bring.
It's an awesome book. I'm surprised we let it slip this far, to be honest, because I read it maybe a couple months ago. If I had to compare it to any book we've done on any season, it's relentless. It's like pure adrenaline motivation. It's so fun. It's a fun read.
This guy's a whole nother level.
He's a monster.
Yeah, he's a whole nother level.
So cool. Well, can't wait.
All right, man.
See you next week, guys.
All right.